Hi everybody, I hope you guys are good. Let's now analyze NZDUSD. And as you guys know, we normally start our analysis on the biggest time frame, which is the monthly chart. And in regards to the monthly chart, the first thing that I can see is that we had this huge structure over here, which had a neckline more or less at this level over here, as you guys can see, right? But we can see that price rejected at this level and then pushed further up, as opposed to breaking to the bottom side of that neckline and then perhaps heading back up to that neckline to test it. And had price done so, we would have looked for a potential selling opportunity again at this point over here, right? So what else do we see, guys, in regards to the monthly chart of NZDUSD? Another thing that I see that is also very much important is the fact that we had this candlestick over here. It is a bearish candlestick with a small body and quite a long lower wick, and it tells us that at the bottom where that wick ends, we have a lot of liquidity there. And as you guys know by now, liquidity represents money that needs to be triggered by the market. And yeah, that's what we expect to happen at some point, that the market will ultimately reach this level to trigger the liquidity that's sitting down here. And as I've said, that is because liquidity is money that needs to be triggered by the market. So for now, what I've done is I've just marked this area because it is very much important. And not only is it important because it is an area of high liquidity, it's also now important because it's now a very strong level of support, as you guys can see. So in the future, we might potentially see price coming back here to maybe retest this area, and then we might then see the market push further up, in which case it would give us a very nice triple bottom, as you guys can see. Can you guys see that, right? Anyway, let's proceed. So let me just zoom in a bit and see what else is happening. Let's see. Another thing that I see also that is happening is that, as much as I said we had this huge M structure over here, we also have a smaller M structure over here, which has a neckline more or less at that point. And you guys know by now that whenever it comes to M structures, ideally we want to see the market breaking to the bottom side of that neckline, right? Heading up to that neckline to test it. And if it does so, at this point is where we would look for potential selling opportunities. And that's exactly what seems to be happening at this point over here, where price broke to the bottom side of that neckline and then went back up to retest that neckline, or rather to test it. And at that neckline is where potentially we should be looking for selling opportunities. And what may actually happen is that the market may push further down to around this level, where we have, as I said, this candlestick over here and this level, which is carrying a lot of liquidity. And as I've said, if I can just zoom out a bit, it may potentially give us that triple bottom that I spoke about, guys, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind as we proceed, right? But what I'm going to do now is just add a neckline for this overextended M structure over here, right? It's an overextended M structure because that first leg is much higher than that second leg, right? So just bear with me, guys, while I add an actual neckline. Yeah, so the reason why I'm adding a neckline, an actual neckline, is so that as we head down to the smaller time frames, we don't forget about the fact that we have this very important area over here. Yeah, so let's proceed, right? So there goes our neckline, right? So the next thing that I'm going to do is, just for the sake of looking for confluence, I'm going to utilize the Fibonacci retracement tool to see if this neckline of this M structure actually aligns with any key numbers that we have on the tool, right? Let's see. Just bear with me, guys. Let's look for Fibonacci. Let's have a look. Let's see, right? So there goes the Fibonacci retracement tool, and at this point in time, we can see that price seems to be rejecting at that 61.8% Fibonacci retracement level, which is very much in line with the neckline of that M structure, right? Just also keep in mind that this candlestick is still pretty much in action. It hasn't closed as yet, right? But should it close as a bearish candlestick, chances are we will see the market push further down, and I believe that ultimately it may potentially reach this level that I spoke about, right? So just keep in the back of your mind that the neckline of this M structure may potentially align with the 61.8% Fibonacci retracement level, right? And just also keep in mind that the monthly candlestick hasn't closed as yet, so we can't really say that the market at this point in time, in as far as the monthly chart goes, has rejected at the 61.8% Fibonacci retracement level. Right. Anyway, let's proceed. Just bear with me. I'm just going to delete this Fib tool, right? And then from here, what I'm going to do is head down to the weekly chart. Let's see, and here we are on the weekly chart, and on the weekly chart we can see that that overextended M structure is better visible, right, where that first leg is much higher than that second leg, and as I've said, the neckline is at that point, right? If I can just zoom in a bit in regards to the weekly chart, we can see that on the weekly chart, the price has given us this candlestick over here. It is a pin bar, as you guys can see, right? And that, in my humble opinion, is a reversal candlestick, and it's giving us an indication that price may actually start moving further down and perhaps to around this level over here, as I've said, guys. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So what else do we see, guys, in regards to the weekly chart of NZDUSD? Another thing that I see that is also very much important, or that we need to pay attention to, is that we may potentially have an inverted head and shoulders at this point, right, as you guys can see, right? However, I believe that this particular pattern will most likely be more visible on the daily chart, because at this point over here, where we should be having that right shoulder, we don't really have a bearish candlestick, but I've got a feeling that once we get to the daily chart, we will see some bearish candlesticks over here, and they would confirm that indeed we would have this particular inverted head and shoulders pattern, as this side would be the left shoulder, this side would be the head, and here on the daily chart we may potentially have the right shoulder, right? And it would also have a neckline at this point over here, right? However, at this point in time, it is not important, and that is because if you look at this level, or rather these candlesticks, we don't have a bearish candlestick at all, where we should be having that shoulder, that right shoulder, right? But as I've said, we may potentially have a right shoulder on the daily chart, right? So anyway, let's proceed, guys. Let's have a look. What else do we see? What else do we see on this chart that we should be paying attention to? Another thing that I see that is also very much important is that as much as we have this candlestick over here on the monthly chart, which is carrying all of that liquidity, we have another candlestick at this point, which also has a very small body and a relatively long lower wick. So it too tells us that we have a lot of liquidity at that point, and that indeed the market needs to come down to this level over here at some point, because there's a lot of, as I've said, liquidity sitting there, and that liquidity represents money that needs to be triggered by the market at one point or another, right? So that is it in as far as the weekly chart goes rather. So what I will do now is head down to the daily chart. Let's have a look. Here we are on the daily chart. Let's see. Just remember that this is the neckline of that huge M structure that I spoke about on the bigger time frames. And remember, guys, that on the weekly chart I spoke about how we could potentially have this pattern over here, which is an inverted head and shoulders pattern. And if I can just zoom in a bit, we can see that we do have what seems to be an inverted head and shoulders pattern, but I won't take it that seriously, and that is because we've had multiple areas where price has retraced, right, at this point as well, right? So I won't take that head and shoulders pattern too seriously, right? Anyway, let's proceed, guys. So what else do we see in regards to the daily chart? In fact, before we proceed, I just want to start off by adding my daily channel, and just bear with me, guys, while I do so. Daily channel, let's have a look. I would add my daily channel more or less in this manner. Let's have a look. I would have my daily channel more or less in this manner. Just bear with me, guys, while I make sure that my channel is pretty accurate. There we go. Right, I would add my daily channel in that manner, right? Just keep in the back of your mind, guys, that on the bigger time frames we spoke about how price has rejected at this point, and that is the neckline of that huge M structure that I spoke about, and the very same level is now a very strong level of resistance. And yeah, let's proceed. So what else do we see, guys, in regards to the daily chart? On the daily chart, I can see that we had also had a head and shoulders pattern, as you guys can see, and it has a neckline at that point, more or less, right? So that's the left shoulder, that's the head, and that's the right shoulder, right? I just hope my drawings are not too confusing. And as I've said, guys, we can see that the neckline, which is, as I've said, over here, just bear with me, the neckline is at this level, and it has been broken to the bottom side, right? Let me just actually add an actual neckline to that area. So there goes our neckline of that head and shoulders pattern. And as I've said, guys, we can see that price or the market has broken that neckline and then went back up to that neckline, right? So what this means is that at this neckline is where we should be looking for potential selling opportunities, right? And that is because, as I've said, guys, we have the head and shoulders pattern, right? And the neckline is at this point, and price has broken to the bottom side of that neckline and then went back up to the neckline to test it. So at that neckline is where we should be looking for potential selling opportunities, right? So at this point in time, I believe that we should indeed be looking for potential selling opportunities. Potential selling opportunities. I'm not saying that we should just be selling by virtue of having price test the neckline. I'm saying that we should be looking for potential selling opportunities, right? So what else do we see, guys, in regards to the daily chart of NZDUSD? Another thing that I see that is also very much interesting or important is the fact that we have, let's see, we have this candlestick over here. It is also a liquidity candlestick, and it tells us that the market at some point has to get to that level to grab that liquidity, because, as I've said, liquidity represents money that needs to be triggered by the market at one point or another. Also, don't forget this level over here, or this zone, which is also carrying all of those liquidity candlesticks. And as I've said, I would love to see price push further down to get to this point, to trigger all of those points. And at this point, we might then look for potential buying opportunities, right? So that is it. And as far as the daily chart goes, I'm just going to mark that one liquidity candlestick, which is this level over here, right? And it's also a very strong level of support, as you guys can see, and that is because we've had multiple rejections at that level, more or less. Can you guys see that, right? So from here, what I'm going to do is head down to the H4 chart. Here we are on the H4 chart. Let me just adjust this neckline somewhat. There we go. And on the H4 chart, what do we see, guys? What do we see on the H4 chart? On the H4 chart, I don't see much really. One important thing that I see that is very interesting is the fact that we have this candlestick over here. It is a pin bar as well, and pin bars rather are reversal candlesticks, and they tell us that potentially we should be selling. As I've said, guys, potentially we should be selling, right? Nonetheless, we're going to look for further reasons for why we should be selling. I wouldn't sell just yet. I would look for further reasons for why I should be selling. But I know that a lot of people saw, or rather a lot of traders and investors saw this pin bar and started selling because they had also seen, as I've said, guys, this, let me just zoom in a bit, just bear with me. They had also seen this, let's just bear with me, guys. They had also seen this head and shoulders pattern, and I said to you guys that the neckline has been broken to the bottom side, and price went up to test that neckline, and at that neckline is where we expect price, or rather the market, to push further down, right? Nonetheless, having said that, we're going to look for further reasons for why we should be selling, right? So just bear with me. What I'm going to do now is add my neckline, or rather my H4 channel. Just bear with me, guys. I just need to ensure that my channel is pretty much accurate. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. And there we go, right? That should be just about right? So we can see that we have further confirmation, right? The first confirmation that we should be selling is the fact that, remember, on the bigger time frames, we had a rejection at this point of that neckline of that huge M structure, and then we had this particular pattern over here, which is a head and shoulders pattern, which has a neckline at that point. And then to add to that, we saw the neckline being broken to the bottom side, right? and price going back to the neckline to test it, right? And the other reason for why we should be selling is that we have this candlestick over here. It is a pin bar, right? And pin bars are reversal candlestick patterns, right? So what do we need to do now? I think the most important thing to do right now is to wait for the market to actually close, in my humble opinion, on this side of this trend line over here, to close on this side of the trend line. And in my humble opinion, that would be confirmation to actually sell, right? Because as much as I know a lot of people have sold already, it's also quite a bit tricky or risky in regards to selling at this point. And that is because also we have another overextended W structure over here. It's an overextended W structure because that first leg is much lower than that second leg, right? And we might potentially see price going to the upside, coming back to the neckline, and then pushing further up because the neckline is also at this point over here, right? I just hope you guys can see that, right? So that is it really in as far as my analysis goes of NZDUSD, and peace out.